If you bought coilovers expecting better performance and handling for your tuner car, I'm sorry, you probably wasted your money. Today I'm going to explain why most coilovers suck and what actually works better for handling, especially on budget builds and grassroots race cars. Almost every project car owner I see dreams of getting just the right ride height for their car. And for them, the gold standard for stance and performance is coilovers. Coilovers are usually the least efficient way to improve handling. I've gone through a few sets in my projects, and let me tell you right now, I've achieved better results in grassroots motorsport with simpler suspension than the set of shiny suspension parts everyone dreams of. But let me clarify, not all coilovers are bad. Mid to high-end motorsport dampers from reputable brands are amazing. But that's not what most people are buying. They're buying budget street coilovers and expecting race car results. So today, I'll break down the 4 things people think coilovers give them and how you can get those same benefits for way less money and usually better performance. Let's go through these one by one. First, ride height. People buy coilovers mainly so they can lower the car. But here's the truth, you don't need full coilovers for that. A simple coilover sleeve kit on a decent shock absorber gives you height adjustment without paying for a full coilover assembly. And more importantly, lowering doesn't automatically improve handling. Lowering too much kills suspension travel and puts geometry out of whack. Ride height should be set for purpose, not looks. I set ride height at a point where I know the suspension is optimized, and that usually means a height not far from stock. Bummer, right? Second, spring rate. This is where most people get it wrong. Consumers usually rely on what the coilover manufacturer recommends, which is usually too stiff for good ride or best handling. Since a lot of their customers will slam their rides, this means the suspension must be as stiff as a board to avoid bottoming out. In my case, I set my own spring rates. The best spring rate should be based on vehicle weight, suspension design, and geometry and purpose. I'll make a separate video on how to choose spring rates properly. Once you figure out the best spring rates front and rear, you can buy them cheaply and easily as coilover springs are of a standard diameter, compatible with almost all coilovers and sleeves. We just bought a pair of springs from Shopee of all places. You should too. Third, camber. Some of the higher grade cheap coilovers feature adjustable camber plates and pre-slotted upper knuckle holes for camber adjustment. But you don't need coilovers to get your camber correct. You can modify your stock shock to gain camber by using a die grinder to slot the one of the knuckle holes and tightening the assembly with a pair of lock nuts. You can also use camber bolts as well. Remember, camber is alignment, not a suspension brand. Now the big one, adjustable damping. The main job of the shock absorber is to control the movement of the spring after it has compressed. Therefore, to make sure that the spring is properly controlled, the shock has to be matched to the spring rate. A tool called a shock dynamometer is required to tune shock absorbers. Here's my question. Who has a shock dyno in the Philippines? No one? I thought so. Those cheap coilovers claim to have something like 32 clicks of adjustment, but usually those clicks are meaningless. Worse, or those clicks adjust compression and rebound at the same time, which shouldn't be the case. For basic shock tuning, rebound is the only factor that needs to be adjusted. This results in that most people are twisting those knobs without knowing what they're changing or what they're doing. But here's the thing, If the shock is properly matched to the spring, you don't need to keep adjusting it. The only time you touch damping again is for emergency tuning, if you need to adjust balance and there's nothing else you can do in a pinch. How I manage this in the grassroots level is to look for springs and shocks that already work together in the spring rate I desire. If I can't find an appropriate shock, I do not stiffen the spring rate too much so that the existing shocks can still do their job. If I had megabucks, I would just buy a performance shock and spring set from a reputable suspension brand and call it a day. Now let me tell you the real reasons people buy coilovers. And most of them have nothing to do with handling. Most people don't buy coilovers for performance. They buy them because they're popular, seem cool, and makes the car look good. Handling is almost secondary. People buy coilovers because everyone on Facebook installs them. YouTubers install them. Not because it's optimal, because it's normalized. In marketing, this is called social proof, a psychological phenomenon where people replicate the actions of others to reflect correct behavior. Most buyers never stop to ask, what spring rate am I getting? Is the shock matched to the spring rate? Is my geometry still correct? Coilovers have been branded as race parts. So people assume that coilovers equals faster, that stock shocks equals slow. Reality is that badly set up coilovers often handle worse than factory suspension. But buyers want their car low. They want their ride slammed. They want that wheel gapping game tight. That's a huge driver, especially in street builds. Nothing wrong with that. But it's aesthetic motivation, not handling motivation. But coilovers are race car parts, right? Track cars have them, drift cars going all sorts of sideways with them. If they have them, then why not join them, right? But what they don't see are the hours of actual testing, shock tuning with specialized equipment, and other factors that don't involve the dampers and ride height at all, such as tires, alignment, and suspension geometry. People copy build sheets and parts lists without understanding the reasons, not doing the work to optimize the setup. Personally, I focus on getting the best tire for the application. The tire makes the most difference in performance and handling. Suspension upgrades and setup only complement the tire. But what makes a bigger effect on lap times is seat time. Learning how to drive the car at its absolute limits would make a lot of difference. Instead of spending thousands of pesos on those fancy coilovers, spend those monies in track time, guidance from a race instructor, or joining a few grassroots races. Also, I don't subscribe to everyone's desire to make their car look good by slamming to the weeds. The stock height is usually the best height. It allows me to use relatively soft springs for best grip and comfort. Plus, I can go through speed humps, no problem. So yeah, coilovers suck when they're used as crutches. Performance and better handling comes from understanding car tuning holistically, not just simply buying shiny car parts. If you want more motorsport education like this, subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Ciao.